Hi, it's Friday the 12th of July. I'm making this video in a different location today. I'm at my parents'. So for having, not been very well for quite a long time, I am back to work now. Yes. I've also been on a holiday to Morocco. Disaster of a holiday, to be perfectly honest, but back from it, got COVID while I was on holiday. Whoa! And so today I'm making this video because I want to, but I'm still feeling just the tail end of COVID and a bit tired because I have CFS, and just still a bit rubbish really, but I'll do my best to make sense. I will try. So this video, I want to talk about identity in relation to CFS. It's not something that I've encountered along the way. I'm sure there is material out there that people have written about it or have, they've talked about it on YouTube videos or whatever, but it's not something I've come across, but it's something I've been contemplating quite a lot the last few months, and I actually think it's really important. So I am going to talk about it. Now, everyone in their lives has to navigate changing identity, all right? So if you just a really simple example, if you're lucky enough to grow old, you will navigate multiple identities, child to, 20-year-old adult, to a 30-year-old adult, to a middle-aged person, 50, and then right through to old age. And each of these ages carries, a specific set of physical characteristics and a certain set of behaviours, expected behaviours, right? And also characters, certain kind of type of character qualities too. So, and sometimes this change in identity can be quite painful. And in a society where older people, old age is not respected. And we idealize and we pray to youth and beauty in our quite sad culture. And, because of that, aging for people can be quite painful. And I've experienced my own struggles with my face collapsing, essentially, from about the age of 45 until my grand old age of 52. Your face, or my face, just started, caving in, basically, and getting jowls and, the saggy bit under here and like a scrawny bit around here. And it's not as bad right now because I put moisturiser on, but, first thing in the morning, it's terrible. And I've got a bit of makeup on, so it doesn't look as bad, but it is bad. And you've seen me bad in other videos, so it is bad. And that can be tricky, particularly if you've identified somebody at different stages who may have been quite attractive or whatever. And particularly as a woman, that's a part of historically what the identity kind of conveys. Its function is to be the woman equals, it's woman's job is to be beautiful in a patriarchal society. I'm saying historically. I'd like to think it's changing. I don't know how much it is, but anyway, the difference, I think, with that kind of change to identity is it happens gradually over time. So you do have time to adjust to it. It's coming up as well. It's predictable, even if it still shocks the hell out of you when you get to that point of getting these lines and grey hair. It can still shock you, but it is predictable. And there is a pre-existing kind of identity for that age. You might not like the identity that's being imposed on you, but it's all there. It's all there. ME/CFS, coming down with that, that's a shock. That's not predictable. And it absolutely erodes everything you have thought about yourself. It erodes your persona. So, you know, that sense of yourself that you perform to the world, that you want to project on the world, and how you think about yourself as a person functioning in the world. So your persona, that takes a massive hit, which is hard to live with. So I want to unpack that a little bit as I reflect on my own experience, and in the process, hopefully, help you to reflect upon your own experience. So with ME/CFS, you come down with it. Most of us, it's quite when I say sudden, it's not necessarily stark, but there is a starting point, and it might take a few weeks or a few months to figure out that it's not a virus, it's not some other nasty condition, and that in fact now you have ME/CFS. So that could take months, right? But in that intervening time where nobody knows what's wrong, then even after that, you look exactly the same. You look the same. So in the eyes of the world, of the people you've always known and mixed with, and, you know, your colleagues and what have you, because you look the same, it follows that by and large, they carried the same expectations of you and your persona. But you're not the same. So there is this disjunct there that can be quite hard to navigate. Now, this is then, I think this issue is kind of extended as a problem. If we take the attitude of, well, I'm going to beat it. I'm going to beat ME/CFS, which is basically what I did for 7.5 years. I had that attitude, so I know from experience, it's really bloody problematic. Because what happens is you don't protect yourself. I haven't protected myself as somebody with ME/CFS. So I have continued to go about my job in the same way, right? And I set up my to-do list for the day, but right up until recently, that to-do list still looked like the old to-do list I used to do for myself, you know, 8 years ago before I came down with this. And so what happens? Every day I fail. Every day I fail to do that to-do list, because every morning I wake up like it's a shock to find that I'm still feeling crap and without energy and lackluster and like I want to lie down again and go back to bed or whatever it is. So you start to fail in your own terms. But because you're not accepting that you have ME/CFS, and you're not probably, if you're like me, thinking about your identity in kind of conscious terms, all you're seeing is the failure. And then also work colleagues, you know, they start slowly. Now this is quite interesting. They slowly, to start with, it's just a shock. You're just not functioning in quite the same way. You know, you're not quite as articulate. You're not quite as energetic. You're not quite as forward in contributing to team things. You're, you know, you're cancelling meetings or not showing up to meetings in a way that you've never done before. So they sort of notice that. Surprisingly, I don't think they notice it as much as you think they do, because most people are locked in their own lives and in their own heads, and they care less about us than we think they do. All right, so that's actually something useful I've learned through having ME/CFS, where quite often I'd go, oh my God, they must think I'm terrible because I wasn't doing the same sorts of things that I'd always done and had done heretofore. And actually, most of them don't notice. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Anyway, but nonetheless, slowly over time, a kind of accumulation of impressions means that they don't hold you in quite the stock that you used to. You're not quite the superstar that you were before you had ME/CFS, right? But all of this, but there's still sort of those expectations somewhere, right? At least in terms of yourself. Now, also a problem, I think, with holding on to this notion that one is going to beat ME/CFS. It's a temporary thing. And I'm going to beat it. Of course, I'm going to beat it. A problem with that, at least insofar as I've experienced it, excuse me, is that I persisted with my full-time job. I have persisted with my full-time job, and I've given everything to it. Now, when I came down with this, I was the only breadwinner, so I had no choice, none. I had to. Over time, my husband has been working, but it's not easy, actually, picking up a new job when you're in your mid to later 50s, believe it or not, because we live in an ageist society. And there are all sorts of protections, except they don't, let's be honest, they don't really work, do they? So, I've sort of just, shut my trap and just gone, come on. Meanwhile, thinking, I'm going to get better anyway. I'm going to get better and I'm going to beat it. And I love my job and everything's going to be all right. And let's just keep pretending long enough that everything's fine and I'm going to be all right. And so what happens is I give everything to my job, everything. Leaving nothing for anything else. So, I'll finish my day at work or in my office at home. And whether that day, has been a 6-hour day or a 10-hour day. And then I'm done. And by the way, the 10-hour days are absolutely running on adrenaline, right? That's it. That's how I manage those sorts of days. And that is not healthy. That is not healthy for somebody with ME/CFS, right? So it's not something I recommend and not something I plan to do ever again, unless it's an emergency. So I would get home from a working day or, head downstairs and lie on the sofa all evening. On good days, I'd be able to read some really trashy novels or watch some really trashy TV or films because that's all mentally I was able to cope with. At my worst, I lie in a dim room and do nothing to recharge. And then we get to the weekends, and my weekends are essentially also spent lying down because I have to recharge for the working week. And at most, I allow myself a phone call with a friend or family member, one per day, one Saturday, one Sunday. This is sufficient to enable me to work full time. But over nearly 8 years, what's happened? It doesn't take a genius to realise that I've lost friends along the way and that I've become alienated from family members. No shit, Sherlock. So I used to be a really sociable person, and I would have, described myself to somebody as an extrovert. Well, I'm not anymore. I'm an introvert of necessity. I'm solitary. I still enjoy company, but I can't do it for too long because I find it very, very wearing. So I really enjoy it. But after a couple of hours, and that's on a good day, I need to, lie down afterwards and recover. So in identity terms, yeah, I've changed at that level too, in ways that sadden me a lot, sadden me deeply, actually. But that's life, isn't it? That's living with ME/CFS. But where I'm at now is, having a few months ago had this terrible relapse and having, I think, for the first time accepted Hello, I'm Louise. I'm a CFS sufferer, right? It's changed things for the better. It is changing things for the better. So while we are all different, and I know, I'm very aware that certain identities can be really problematic, that there are pros and cons to, assigning oneself any kind of disability, right? Society still not always very kind or helpful with people who have disabilities. And CFS ME now in the UK is counted as a disability. Interestingly, last year when I had a relapse and I went to my doctor about it, and I said, should we be talking about me being registered disabled? Is this something we should do? And he didn't have time to go into it, but he was quite wary about going down that route. He said, because once you're registered as disabled, sort of that's it, and it carries with it implications. And I assume he meant it carries implications with regards to how employers view you, or how society views you. I'm not 100% sure, so I might be putting words in his mouth. But in my experience, actually claiming that identity of CFS sufferer, I have found surprisingly powerful and helpful. And I literally feel more powerful having accepted the identity. And I'm not saying that it's been an easy process. I have been grieving. I have been grieving my old self. The idea that I've lost her forever, you know what I mean? That's that's really tough. That's really tough sometimes. So I'm still going through that process, but I do think that there are way more positives to accepting the title than there are negatives. So one of the things that accepting the identity has done is prompt discussions with my husband about how we find ways of me going part-time in time. We can't afford it yet, not even close to me being able to afford it, but it's something now on our radar and it's an aim. So hopefully in not too many years, we'll be in a position where I'll be able to go, say, to a 0.6 or something, assuming my employers said yes to that. I'm very good at my job, so I hope they will. And and then the joy of that will be that I could maybe become sociable again. I could get friends back. I could actually, instead of lying on the sofa when my husband goes off to meet our friends and go to the pub for the night, I could actually join him. Oh, shock horror. How amazing would that be? I could actually go to the theatre again. I literally haven't been to the theatre in probably 3/4 of a year. It's absolutely pointless. I can't do it. I'm toast by the evening. And even matinees can be a battle, and I usually end up leaving at the interval because I'm so shattered. So I could go back to the theatre, which would be exciting. And do any or all of the other things I'd love to explore with life. It also means, in accepting that I am an ME/CFS sufferer, that I may actually start to actually pace for the first time in my life since having this. I did another video quite a few months ago about pacing, about what a struggle it is, how impossible it is to pace. And I stand by quite a lot of what I said in that video, because, how do you know how to pace? How do you know what is 80% of your 100% energy envelope? And how do you stay within that? I still stand by all of that. But what I remember in that video, talking about how I think I said words along the lines of, my identity is bound up in pushing the envelope, in pushing boundaries. And so it's really interesting to me to reflect back on that, how I had started claiming ME/CFS, but I hadn't accepted the identity you know, in a much more in my bones sense. So I was still clinging to that notion, that old persona of me as, you know, as a superwoman, right? Who I can't be anymore. So what's happened recently, as I have accepted it and I've started to go, no, I have this. Oh God, okay. No, I can't push the envelope anymore. What a nonsense. Why have I been trying to do that? That's ridiculous and unhelpful and unhealthy. But it's also occurred to me, as I've been flat on my back, as I was flat on my back for so many weeks, that actually I can push the envelope in different ways. So maybe in terms of writing, maybe in terms of, you know, spirituality, and I can learn and work in other ways, and starting this channel, you know, so finding other ways of applying myself, of exploring new interests and new talents maybe. And I think finally what it's done recently, as I've been rethinking my identity, and also alongside that reflecting on the kind of on friends and family who were really there for me when I was really struggling, and it's made me rethink my values and the kinds of characteristics and qualities that I really value in other people. And I think we live in a terribly, by and large, uncaring society. And, you know, I look at my son and what he watches and the things he says, and it's all surface, it's all appearance, superficial, and it's all about money and being cool and all the rest of it. And I really wonder where any concern about community or care is, right? And generosity and kindness and compassion. And I think as part of my working through my persona, I am owning in a way that has been, I've always felt I didn't have time, I didn't have energy for before, right? I'm owning doing these videos and doing some good and planning more good and wanting to help and wanting to give back and wanting to be generous, because all other people's generosity essentially saved me, really. And I know that our society and culture don't value those things by and large, because you can't put a price on it, right? It's not economically valuable, and we only seem to prize youth, beauty and money. So it's so sad. I'm so saddened by how we are these days. Oh, and finally, last thing, is I've owned being 52, and I've decided I am growing out the colour in my hair and I'm going to go white. It's quite exciting. I'm actually quite excited, right? I am 52. Why the hell am I colouring my hair and pretending I'm younger? I'm 52. I'm 52. And I have CFS, and I'm a profoundly flawed human being. Who messes up more than they do anything right, and who, yeah, so I think I'm part of my project is just, I mean, I've still got the makeup, haven't I? So you haven't got the full unbridged truth. You don't want that. And I think there's only so far, I don't know, only so far one can push back against a culture that prizes beauty so much. So yeah, a bit of makeup when I'm feeling reasonably good, as I am now. Interestingly, having had COVID over the last sort of 2 weeks, I was like, oh, I've only got COVID, I'm fine. I was actually up and about in a way that I couldn't, and I had it quite badly. I mean, don't get me wrong, I needed to be lying down, right? But I was going, well, this is actually an easier form of tiredness than what I had, you know, a month preceding that. So that was quite interesting. But I've talked enough, I think. As always, I wish you well, whoever you are, wherever you are, struggling with ME, CFS. Good luck with it. And if you have any thoughts about your own experience of, your own persona, your own identity, then I would be very interested to read about those in the comments. Take care. You are not alone.